Good morning. It's 8 o'clock local time in Warsaw. I'm Diana Skaya, and you're watching World News. During a meeting with British Prime Minister Keir Starmer on Thursday, President Donald Trump spoke about the progress of the negotiations between Ukraine and the United States. Now, the president said that minerals deal with Ukraine is the security guarantee that Kyiv needs against Moscow, and he added that the agreement will be a basis for future relations with the United States.
As I discussed with Prime Minister Starmer, the next step we're making is toward a very achievable ceasefire. We hope that that can happen quickly because thousands of young people, in this case, we're not talking about Americans, we're talking about Ukrainians and Russians are being killed every week, thousands. The disaster in Ukraine shows exactly why it's so important for the United Kingdom and other NATO partners to make large investments in their defense capabilities. In many cases, 4% or 5% of GDP would be appropriate. After years of chronic underfunding, there's an urgent need to catch up for some countries. And I want to thank the Prime Minister once again for traveling here today.
We've discussed a plan today to reach a peace that is tough and fair, that Ukraine will help shape, that's backed by strength, to stop Putin coming back for more. And I'm clear that the UK is ready to put boots on the ground and planes in the air to support a deal, working together with our allies, because that is the only way that peace will last. As the President says, the deal has to come first, but yes, our teams are going to be talking about how we make sure that deal sticks, is lasting and enforced. So our teams will be talking about that. I think I'm hosting 18 countries on Sunday to further our discussions.
On Friday, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy is scheduled to meet Donald Trump in Washington. Now, the trip is expected to revolve around securing guarantees from the United States against any future Russian aggression. Now, Zelenskyy's visit comes just as the U.S. Treasury Secretary announced that a deal regarding Ukrainian minerals has been finalized. Now, during his trip to the U.S. Capitol, President Zelenskyy is expected to sign a landmark economic deal with the United States. Now, the agreement is aimed at financing the reconstruction of war-damaged Ukraine, creating a long-term partnership between the two countries. Now, while the deal references Ukraine's security, a separate agreement on that matter will be discussed later in the day. Donald Trump also has denied calling Ukrainian President Zelenskyy a dictator, despite describing him that way on his social media platform, Truth Social, earlier this month. Now, this is what Trump said at a press conference alongside British Prime Minister Keir Starmer when asked by a reporter if he still held that view.
Did I say that? I can't believe I said that. Next question.
We should continue what we've been doing for the last 3 years. This is what Polish Foreign Minister Radosław Sikorski said when asked about Poland and Japan's support for Ukraine. Now, Sikorski made this statement in an exclusive interview with TVP World in Japan, where he is currently on an official visit, where he's going to strengthen economic cooperation and discuss security.
We should stay the course, strengthen our military capabilities by spending more, thereby reassure Washington that burdens are shared equally, fairly, and stay the course also in our support for Ukraine, so that Russia doesn't benefit from its aggression. Japan is not only our trade partner, but also a big investor in Poland, employing tens of thousands of highly skilled Polish workers. We are open for business. Our prosperity is now comparable on a purchasing power parity. What Lech Wałęsa dreamt of all those years ago has now become a reality. We have built in Poland a second Japan.
With U.S. envoy Keith Kellogg's visit to Europe and Kyiv, there is a slight increase in optimism across the globe regarding America's stance on Ukraine. However, some argue that Donald Trump's statement that NATO accession for Kyiv is off the table only serves to embolden Vladimir Putin.
That helps mitigate a little bit of that concern. We have negotiations going on a critical minerals agreement. And we have Zelenskyy visiting Washington, perhaps arriving tonight, but meeting with Trump tomorrow. And perhaps that'll mitigate these concerns that, that Washington has been talking about Ukraine. It's a concession that I believe only emboldens Putin, gives Putin confidence that he can get his way. And that's not the right way to start a negotiation, particularly against a leader like Putin who's determined to suborn Ukraine.
On Thursday, the EU High Representative for Foreign Affairs, Kaja Kallas, spoke out on recent diplomatic contacts between Russia and the United States. Now, while in the U.S., Kallas compared Vladimir Putin to Osama bin Laden and asked whether he, just like Putin, would have been invited to the negotiating table.
My question is why we should give Russia what they want on top of what they have already done. I mean, attacking Ukraine, annexing territory, occupying territory, and now offering something on top of it. I mean, I brought this example once. I mean, consider here in America that after the 9/11, you would have sat down with Osama bin Laden and said that, okay, what else do you want? I mean, it's unimaginable.
The existing nuclear defense capabilities of France and the United Kingdom could provide protection for all of Europe. However, further nuclear proliferation on the continent would be a dangerous move. Now, this is according to Anders Fogh Rasmussen, the former NATO Secretary General, who gave an exclusive interview to TVP World's Adam Yasser.
I stick to the nuclear non-proliferation treaty. However, in Europe, we have two countries that are nuclear armed, namely France and the UK. And I would suggest talks with those two countries of putting their nuclear arms at the disposal of a European defense structure one way or the other. I think it would make sense to include existing nuclear arms into the defense of Europe.
Should that fail? Should France insist its nuclear doctrine does not allow this? And should the UK also say, no, we keep our nuclear arms to ourselves? Should, let's say, another coalition of the willing, including, I don't know, the Baltic states, the Nordics, Poland, this new alliance that we see within NATO, should they pursue nuclear arms in a worst-case scenario?
I understand very well your question, but I think it would be dangerous to start a nuclear arms race. So I would prefer that existing nuclear armed states pool their resources together, put them at the disposal for Europe in one way or the other.
Do you see any indication that the French and the British are prepared to do that?
I wouldn't exclude that. I will remind you that President Macron has very often spoken about European autonomy, increased European capacity, military capacity, etc. So if deeds should follow his words, then I think the French would need to put their nuclear arms at the disposal for Europe.
And more on this and other topics in the latest episode of On the Record on our YouTube channel. Moving on now to Germany, where the country's Christian Democrat conservatives, who came first in last weekend's elections, will start exploratory coalition talks with the Social Democrats. Now, CDU leader Friedrich Merz, who will most likely become Germany's next chancellor, said he wants a government in place by Easter on April 20th. A coalition between the Christian Democrats and third-placed SPD is the only viable option for forming a government, provided both parties honor a commitment to exclude the far-right Alternative for Germany, which finished second in Sunday's vote. Now, the exploratory talks will involve 9 senior figures from each party. The discussions could lead to more detailed talks with working parties for different policy areas that could develop a legislative agenda. Austria's mainstream parties have clinched a deal to form a ruling coalition after inconclusive elections 5 months ago. Now, the new government will exclude the anti-immigration and pro-Russian Freedom Party, even though it is the largest group in parliament. Our Aaron Damman reports.
Austria's coalition crisis appears to be over.
We have not tried to negotiate our way down to minimal compromises. We have deliberately combined the ideas and priorities of all parties into a common programme for the future of Austria. We have succeeded in reaching a compromise that moves Austria forward. Making compromises is an old and proven Austrian virtue.
These three leaders striking a deal with one mission: keep the far-right FPÖ out of power. But that mission has been fraught and painful, with negotiations repeatedly collapsing over a record 5 months.
It has to be said openly that what seemed impossible at the beginning of January has now become possible.
The FPÖ came first in September's election with 28% of the vote, but were then sidelined before getting the chance to lead coalition talks, which broke down, leading to a blame game with the Conservative People's Party. Some Austrians were fed up with the back and forth.
I'm still annoyed because the others took 3 months and didn't get anything together. Time for new elections. I don't believe that any other constellations will really achieve the goal.
My opinion is that it will be sensible for the three parties that were unable to form a coalition at the time to finally come together.
The country's latest coalition arrangement does exactly that, putting the People's Party, centre-left Social Democrats and Liberal Neos all side by side, with Conservative leader Christian Stockner to become Chancellor, a position he wasn't previously running for.
We want to create the obligation that everyone who receives something from our society also contributes something to this society, be it through work or community service. We will continue the fight against illegal migration, the abuse of our asylum system, and the fight against extremism.
The deal still needs formal approval by the leadership of the two bigger parties and a 2/3 majority of Neos members at a convention expected on Sunday, but one expert says this is a big step forward.
It's exactly 151 days since the parliamentary elections in Austria, and there were so many hurdles along the way with creating this coalition.
As the far right heads back into opposition, already calling for snap elections, the pressure on Austria's freshly minted administration will be higher than ever.
Hundreds of Czech farmers joined pan-European protests against food imports from outside the European Union on Thursday. Now, the protesters are demanding changes to EU trade policies and less bureaucracy.
A year ago, we gathered here with people from both Slovakia and our side. Back then, there were a lot more people. Now, my friends and I have noticed that there are about a third fewer people. Many farmers have simply given up because we are dealing with a government that doesn't care about farmers at all and keeps putting obstacles in our way. So people have just resigned themselves to the situation. For me, the impact is that I have to comply with an overwhelming number of administrative and record-keeping requirements, while at the same time we cannot sell our goods at a price that matches imports, whether they come from the East or directly from South America.
And that completes this edition of World News here on TVP World. I'm Diana Skaya. Thanks for watching.